Veterans advocate Paul Rieckhoff here in studio, host of the Independent Americans podcast, listening in on that. I'm sure you have some views on it as well. The numbers right here on the tablet, we can pop it up, the Army recruiting numbers. At the end of this chart, you're going to see the move up that people have been focusing on right here. So what do you think? What's behind it?
Overall good news, and there's an old saying that victory has 1,000 fathers and failure is an orphan. There's a lot of folks taking credit for this, but I think Mark's touched on a couple of them. There's also significant recruiting bonuses, right?
Yeah.
They're giving out as much as $50,000, and money does talk, especially in an environment where it's tough for college graduates. And it's important to note the federal government is shrinking. You can't go work at TSA or VA or Department of Defense like you could have just a couple years ago. DOGE is cutting federal jobs. Everybody understands that message. And so the Army is still a source of stability, especially given the Trump agenda. It's going to be more a source of stability than any other part of the federal government right now, because Department of Defense budget is going up while other budgets are going down. And I think Mark touched on something else. There's important skills you can uniquely get in the Army that are really important right now. Cyber is really critical, drone warfare, any of that high-tech, forward-looking stuff. The Army is where it's at, and I think they're doing a good job of promoting that.
On Trump specifically, you've been critical of this administration, but in particular the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. Would you give them some credit here? You think they've improved the environment?
I don't know if that's necessarily true. We'll see. I mean, I don't think most recruits even know who Pete Hegseth is, and they know who the president is, obviously, but it comes down to bread and butter, kitchen table issues, whether or not they can put food on their table, whether or not this is a good option for them for leadership, and at a time when the job market is really, really tough for these folks in their late teens and early 20s. So we'll see. I think it's easy to get a run here in the beginning of the administration and take credit. Let's look at a year or 2 years from now. One other big factor. There's no war. Right? There's a lot less war happening. People aren't getting killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're still getting killed from time to time, but not having the imminent threat of deploying to combat and deploying to combat multiple times is also allowing them to expand the recruiting pool more so than a couple years ago.
The other side of it for Hegseth, there have been a few other stories here. The tablet we have is communication staff. That recruiting has not been going up. A lot of people have been leaving. And then I wonder what you think. Mark mentioned DEI. What are they getting at with some of these things that they do? Like Hegseth, for example, it's Pride Month. They're renaming a ship, I guess, so it was named after a gay rights advocate. And, what kind of
two pieces
going on?
I think I would argue that sometimes they're focusing on the wrong things, right? And recruiting's a good thing to focus on. Renaming ships because of a political agenda, probably more of a distraction.
Maybe do they think that helps and get a certain type of person?
It's overtly political, right? I mean, it's very unprecedented to rename a ship. There's, for example, the Harvey Milk ship, which is named after the gay rights activist who was also a Navy vet. Yeah. It's unprecedented to take the name off a ship and rename it, which is a pretty political thing to do. And it's also bad luck. In the Navy, they'll say you don't rename a ship because it's bad luck. But it feels like the culture war is bleeding over into the military, which I don't think is good for anybody. It might be good politics for an extreme right-wing base, but erasing Jackie Robinson, removing Harvey Milk,
I remember
it looks like they're trying to erase a certain group of people.
But is it related to that first conversation? You think it's done on purpose to try to improve recruiting of certain, certain people think it's a good idea, like maybe you may think it's a bad idea.
If it's a method toward recruiting, you're going to narrow the number of people that you're recruiting. Right. Gay people aren't going to love a military that strips the name of Harvey Milk off, right? People of color aren't going to be excited about Jackie Robinson being removed from the Department of Defense. So I think they've got an optical challenge here, and Hegseth himself is not stable, right? He's in controversy. His communication staff is leaving. People want to join a military because it's a stable job, it's an honorable job, it's a good thing to do, not just for your career, but for your life.
Right.
And I think the more they focus on that and the less they focus on politics, it's better for our troops and it's better for our national politics, not just partisan politics.
One more quick thing before we take a break here. We were talking about that story with China. Okay, this people say it could be agro-terrorism, this fungus that was smuggled in, University of Michigan. Yeah. Thoughts on how big a deal something like this could be?
I think it's a reminder that China's the real threat. And it's not DEI. It's not, a ship named after a gay rights activist. We've got a real imminent threat in China. We've got to deal with Putin and North Korea and all the other allies that are aligned against us. And I hope it can refocus people, because China is not sitting back having little political wars. They're amassing a serious military operation that's ready to confront us in the future. And it's probably our most daunting adversary on the global playing field. And this is a reminder of that. We got to be ready for anything.
Paul joins us each week. His podcast, The Independent Americans, this week is the mayor of Chattanooga, Tennessee on, so you should check that out wherever you get your podcast. But we're not done with you yet. You're actually sticking around. President Volodymyr Zelensky suggesting a ceasefire be in place until he and Putin get a chance to meet face-to-face for peace talks. Here now, Andrei Dobryansky is from the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. He's here with us in studio, and Paul Rykhoff is still here. He's the founder of American Veterans for Ukraine to talk about all of this. Level of kind of optimism versus pessimism for you. We've talked about this war so much.
Yeah.
Now, so did Putin and Trump today, for what it's worth.
It depends on day-to-day, week-to-week with President Trump. He apparently had a conversation. It wasn't on the schedule, so we were all surprised when we heard there was an hour-long conversation.
Yeah, we thought he was going to speak to the president of China.
Yeah.
Instead, it was Putin.
There was really no representation from the U.S. other than the NATO ambassador at the Ramstein meeting today. So the United States kind of, again, not being America first, not in the lead, had a call with Putin, no follow-up call with Zelensky. That was kind of what we established 2 weeks ago. Call Zelensky, call Putin on the same day, check in with the European allies. Then we have this weird Truth Social that we're all responding to that got deleted and then came back. I think the rest of the world, including Ukraine, is trying to figure out what is going on, who is the lead on this project, because we're definitely not seeing Secretary Hegseth talking to other defense ministers. We're 20 days out of the NATO summit. What is going to be the theme that America proposes? And that's the big question for Ukraine.
Yeah, we know, as we said, Zelensky wants a truce until he and Putin can get together. But I would say probably good luck with that, Paul, after what we've seen. Where do you think things stand?
To use Trump's structure here, I think that Zelensky's got some good cards now, because he's got some momentum, right?
Because of the drone strikes?
Well, you got the minerals deal, right? And then you got Trump changing his language. He actually called Putin crazy on social media, which is significant. And then this spectacular drone strike, which you have to, as a military guy myself, you have to respect the innovation and the effectiveness and the aggression.
Did that surprise
of Ukraine. Yeah, I think it surprised most people in the world who weren't involved in the operation, but also to see them on the offense, to see them hitting Putin where it hurts and continuing to get momentum, even when the U.S. is unpredictable, I think is really, really important. I think maybe most importantly, Ukraine continues to inspire the world. They're fighting the bad guy, they're fighting the good fight, and they're doing it creatively. And there's a lot of debate about whether or not to add Ukraine to NATO. I want an ally like Ukraine who can do this kind of innovative strike that shocks the world and puts the enemy on the defense.
How does that, what we're watching there, and also the bridge, that was some video too of the bridge going in from Crimea that was damaged. How did what we've seen, how does it change the dynamic, do you think? What's the impact?
Well, it brings up the card theory. So we had the February meeting, and President Trump was egged on, I believe, by J.D. Vance and other people, and said, go get him, and he said, you don't have cards. Clearly, this operation had been in the works for 18 months. The Kerch Bridge operation, that was months as well of underwater diving, laying down the TNT. Yeah. This is something that Ukraine has had. Do you want to be playing cards with Zelensky? If he has these kind of cards and not revealing them, we know that Ukraine has more operations in the works. What's going to be the next step? I think it's more pressure on Russia. But how does the West respond? We had a coalition of the willing. They were ready to coordinate with Trump. Trump kind of blew that up with the first Istanbul meeting.
Right.
Now, he's also not doing the same thing he did last time. So he's a little bit all over the place. And again, we don't have a consistent voice from the administration. I'd love to see the Senate take it up with the sanctions bill, but that's going nowhere right now.
I don't think they will without Trump.
Absolutely
I mean, they have the votes.
They might. I mean,
they have the votes. Yeah. But I'm just saying, I don't know that they would do that, like Lindsey Graham and others who support this, because they have like 80 people. They could override a Trump veto. But the hints we've been getting from those types of people is that they wouldn't necessarily do that. You think they might?
But the fact that anybody in the Republican Party is willing to break ranks with Trump is significant. Lindsey Graham went to Ukraine with Senator Blumenthal, a Democrat, to show a united force. They've got a sanctions bill, which is long overdue, and I think really, really important. And there's some momentum behind it. Even if it fails, it's a big step ahead of where we were a couple of months ago, where Trump was screaming at Zelensky in the Oval Office. I mean, this is momentum, and I think you see the momentum shifting toward Ukraine from Trump all the way down to Republicans in the House.
But the risk here in the short term is that even though, you'd want things to calm down a bit and have some talks, but Putin's probably going to, if anything, and he's already doing this, but even more so, ramp things up.
Well, we didn't even hear that.
Odessa and other things.
We didn't hear that from President Trump. The last Truth Social, when President Trump said he wasn't satisfied, he didn't like the fact that Putin was attacking, there's no Vladimir, stop. This was a Truth Social post about having a conversation with Putin and that he expects Putin to retaliate. What does that mean? That means civilian locations will be targeted. Those same planes they targeted, those planes, the Tu-95, Tu-22, those are the ones that launch rockets against children's cancer wards, against maternity wards.
Yeah.
Those are the locations. And there was no mention of Vladimir, don't attack civilian locations. That's the big question.
And the other question from a practical standpoint for Putin, Paul, is how much damage did the Ukrainians do? I mean, Russia's trying to downplay it, which is typical. You would, oh, no, this is not that big of a deal. But the video looked pretty bad. And they claim they got $7 billion worth of damage from, 100 and some odd drones.
Yeah, I mean, Zelensky's in a better position to negotiate if he continues to punish Putin, to hit him where it hurts. And that's what he's doing. And popular support in Russia is important, right? Putin does have to keep his country together. He doesn't want to see a violent overthrow from within because the Russian people are sick of this. They've been mostly insulated from the civilian casualties so far. But if you're living in Russia, you now know Ukraine can reach out and touch you. And I think that is very, very important. And a really important factor that I think always gets lost. This is good for American national security to have 41 bombers off the table, right? Ronald Reagan would have been thrilled if you told him, hey, we're going to knock out 41 Russian bombers and not lose a single American life. That's a great upside for the U.S. and for our national security long term.
Yeah. Instead, Trump said, well, Putin's going to have to fight back against us. So it's a different response. All right. Thank you, Paul. And thank you, Andre. Good to see both of you. Speaking of President Trump, he wants the Congress now